Chapter 4 Objects of Great Value. The first week of the Endurance salvage had been all about mapping the wreckage and the expansive debris field. "Here's what we know," Captain Soberanis told Scythe Pozuelo, bringing up a holographic display. "The island of the Enduring Heart sank right along the ridge of a subsea mountain range. It hit a peak on the way down and split into 3 sections." Jerico rotated the image. "2 segments came to rest on this plateau east of the ridge. The third dropped into a trench on the western side, and it's all within a debris field that spans 25 nautical miles." "How long until we start bringing things up?" Pozuelo asked. "It's a lot to explore and catalog," Jerico told him. "Maybe a month until we can begin, but a proper salvage is going to take years, decades even." Pozuelo examined the image of the wreckage, perhaps studying what was left of the skyline, looking for familiar landmarks. Then he took it upon himself to rotate the map and pointed to the section way down in the trench. "The map looks incomplete here. Why?" "The depth. The treacherous terrain is making it difficult to map, but that can come later. We can begin with the debris field and the sections that came to rest on the plateau." Pozuelo waved his hand as if swatting at a gnat. "No, I'm more interested in this section in the trench." Jerico took a moment to study the scythe. The man had been affable and forthcoming thus far. Perhaps there was enough trust between them now to gain some information Pozuelo might not be willing to share with others. "If there's something specific you're looking for, it would help if I knew." Pozuelo took a moment before he answered. "The Amazonian Scythedom is interested in the recovery of priceless artifacts. Those artifacts can be found in the range of the Museum of the Scythedom." "The Enduring Heart?" asked Jerico. "I'm sure the heart itself is long dead and devoured." "It was in a protective case," Pozuelo told him. "Whatever remains of it should be preserved in a museum." Then he added, "And there were other items." When it was clear that Pozuelo was not going to reveal any more, Jerico said, "Understood. I'll instruct the other crews that they can salvage the sections of the city on the higher plateau, but my team alone will take on the wreckage in the trench." Pozuelo relaxed a little bit. He took a moment to look at Jerico with what was either curiosity or admiration, or a little bit of both. "How old are you, really, Jerry?" he asked. "Your crew tells me you turned a corner before assuming command, which would put you at about twice your physical age. But you seem older. Why, sir? I'm thinking that wasn't the first corner you've turned." Jericho took a moment, considering how best to answer. "I'm not the age that I tell my crew," Jericho finally admitted, because a half-truth was better than no truth at all. The Enduring Heart, the one for which the great floating city was named, was the oldest living heart in the world, kept alive by electrical stimulation and rejuvenating nanites so that it was forever young. It had beat over 9 billion times, and was a symbol of humanity's conquest of death. However, it died when the island sank and power was cut to its electrodes. As Scythe Pozuelo had said, it was, indeed, protected within an impact-resistant tempered glass case. But the case could not stand the pressure so far down, and it imploded long before reaching bottom. As for the heart itself, or what was left of it after the implosion, it would not turn up among the debris the salvage team eventually found. No doubt it had been devoured, if not by the carnivorous sea life that had been lathered into an artificial feeding frenzy, then by some lucky scavenger who just happened to be passing by. While all the other salvage teams were satisfied to go after the easier salvage, Yuri Soberanis' crew labored tirelessly with little to show for its efforts for weeks. While other crews were bringing up treasure troves, Captain Soberanis brought up virtually nothing. With the towers of the drowned city leaning at steep angles, ripping free and tumbling with the slightest provocation into the depths, it was too dangerous to actually send crew members down. While amphibious Tasmanians were fine for shallow salvages, they couldn't dive past 60 meters without a pressure suit. They had already lost one robotic sub, crushed by a plunging refrigerator that came crashing through the window of a shifting tower. True, anyone who was killed could be sent off for revival, but that required being able to retrieve their bodies from the trench. It was simply not worth the risk. Pozuelo, usually a man of measured demeanor, and not easily riled, was now prone to fits of frustration. I realize that this is a delicate process, Pozuelo said after the 5th week of remote deep dives. But sea slugs move faster than you and your crew. What made his frustration worse was the arrival of more and more scythe yachts. Representatives from nearly every Scythedom in the world had shown up, because everyone knew that he was after the vault of relics and fetters. It was fine when it remained in a place too cold and too deep for even sunlight to reach, but out of sight did not mean out of mind. Your Honor, forgive my impertinence, Yuri told Sydney, because now they were most certainly on a first-name basis. But it's a steel bolt sealed within another steel bolt, buried beneath 1,000 tons of wreckage on the side of a dangerous slope. Even if it wasn't at the bottom of the sea, it would be hard to reach. It requires meticulous engineering, effort, and above all, patience. If we don't wrap this up in short order, railed Pozuelo, Goddard will swoop in and take everything we bring up. Yet Goddard's presence at the site was, thus far, conspicuously absent. He had sent no salvage teams or representatives to ensure he got his share of the diamonds. Instead, he raved publicly about defiling hollow waters and dishonoring the dead, claiming he wanted no part of anything that was found down there. But it was all posturing. He wanted those diamonds as much as anyone, if not more, which meant that he had a plan to get them. There was no denying that Goddard had a knack for getting whatever he wanted, and that kept every Scythedom in the world on edge. Scythedom? That word used to mean the global organization as a whole, but now regional thinking had taken over. There was no sense of a world Scythedom anymore, only provincial politics and petty grievances. Pozuelo had nightmares of a world where Goddard had all the diamonds and could handpick every single new scythe. Were that to happen, the world would tilt so heavily toward his so-called new order, it would tip off its axis, and the voices of those who resisted him would be lost in the pained wails of those he so gleefully gleaned. Will you ever tell me what's in the vault that's put such a bee in everyone's bonnet? Yuri asked after a dive that was deemed successful because no equipment was lost. A bee? More like a hornet's nest, Pozuelo answered. The vault, as does any vault, contains objects of great value. But in this case, those objects are not your concern, because they are only of value to scythes. At that, Yuri smirked. I always wondered where the scythe rings were kept. Pozuelo cursed himself for having said anything at all. You're too clever for your own good. That, Jerry said, has always been my problem. Pozuelo sighed. Was it so bad that the captain knew? The affable Madagascan was not a greedy sort, treated the crew well, and had shown nothing but respect for Pozuelo. The scythe needed someone to trust in all this, and Captain Sobranis had certainly proven herself trustworthy. Or himself, as the sky was currently under heavy cover of clouds. It's not the rings but the gems themselves, many thousands of them, Pozuelo admitted. Whoever controls those diamonds controls the future of the Scythedom. While we in the Lone Star region would like to remain neutral on this matter, it's become clear to us in Texas that Highblade Goddard intends to impose his will upon all of North America, and perhaps the world entire. Without Gruntslayers to check his ambition, we fear his influence will grow like a mortal age cancer. As a charter region, we are free to do whatever we wish within our borders. We are, therefore, breaking off all contact with the Mid-American Scythedom. Effective immediately, any and all Mid-American sites found within our region shall be escorted to the nearest border and ejected. We go as far as to question Mr. Goddard's right to be Highblade, since an edict from Munira was never publicly made before the Grand Slayers perished. As a matter of policy, we do not wish to involve other regions in our decision. Others can do as they see fit. We just want to be left alone. Official proclamation from Her Excellency, Hybrid Barbara Jordan of Texas. Chapter 5. Your service is no longer required. From Thunderhead Primary Communication Exchange to Loriana Barchok. Date April 1st, year of the Raptor, 1715 GMT. Subject Response Authority Interface Dissolution, mailed by TPCE, signed by FCAI. Security Standard Encryption. My dearest Loriana, I am sorry to inform you that your services as a Nimbus agent are no longer required. I know you have performed to the best of your ability, and this permanent release from service is by no means a reflection on you or your work for the authority interface. However, I have decided to dissolve the authority interface in its entirety, effective immediately. It shall cease to exist as a managerial entity, and therefore you are released from service. I wish you luck in all of your future endeavors. Respectfully, the Thunderhead. If someone had told Loriana Barchok that her job would cease to exist less than 1 year out of Nimbus Academy, she would not have believed it possible. She would not have believed a great many things possible. But those things had all happened, which meant that anything could happen now. Anything. For all she knew, a hand could reach out of the sky with tweezers and pluck her eyebrows with impunity. Not that they needed plucking, her eyebrows were fine, but it could happen. She wouldn't put anything past this peculiar world anymore. At first, Lorena thought that the email from the Thunderhead was a joke. There were plenty of pranksters at the Fulcrum City AI offices, but it became quickly evident that this was no prank. At the end of that horrible ear-splitting noise that blew out many a sound system around the world, the Thunderhead sent every Nimbus agent everywhere the identical message. The authority interface had been shut down. Every single agent was now unemployed and unsavory, just like everyone else. If the world is unsavory, another agent lamented, then of course we're out of a job. We're supposed to be the professional interface for the Thunderhead. How can we do that if we're unsavory and, by law, forbidden to talk to it? No point in obsessing over it, said another colleague, who didn't seem bothered at all. What's done is done. But to fire all of us, Loriana said. Every single one with no warning. That's millions of people. The Thunderhead has its reasons for everything, the nonplussed colleague said. The fact that we can see the logic shows our limitations, not the Thunderhead's. Then, when the news of Endura's sinking broke, it became evident, at least to Loriana, that humanity was being punished for it, as if somehow everyone was complicit in the crime. So now the Ground Slayers were gone, the Thunderhead was irked, and Loriana was out of a job. Reevaluating one's life was not something easily accomplished. She moved back in with her parents and spent a great deal of time doing a whole lot of nothing. There was employment everywhere, free training and education for any profession. The problem wasn't finding a career path. It was finding something she actually wanted to do. Weeks passed in what would have been despair, but was stilled down to melancholy by her emotional nights. Even so, that melancholy was deep and pervasive. She was not accustomed to idle and productive time, and was completely unprepared for being cast into the winds of an uncertain future. Yes, everyone in the world was subject to those winds now, but at least others had jobs to tether them to the familiar. Routines to keep their Thunderhead free lives in some seamless further. All Loriana had was time to dwell on things. It was overwhelming. At her parents' behest, she had gone in to get her nanites tweaked in order to raise her spirits, because not even melancholy could be tolerated these days. But the line was too long. Loriana could not abide waiting, so she left. Only unsavory's wait in line, she told her parents when she got back, referring to the way the Thunder had organized the AI's office of unsavory affairs with intentional inefficiency. Only after she said it did the obvious occur to her. She herself, wasn't shivery. Did that mean that pointless lines and horrendous waits were it now going to be the norm? It brought her to tears, which in turn made her parents more insistent that she go back to have her nan each week. "We know things are different for you now, but it's not the end of the world, honey," her parents had told her. Yet for some strange reason, she thought that it might be. And then a month after the world went on savory, her former boss showed up at their door. Lorena assumed it was just a courtesy call. Clearly it couldn't be about rehiring her, since her boss had been laid off along with all the other agents. Even their old offices were gone. According to the news, construction crews had shown up at authority interface headquarters throughout the world to convert the buildings into apartments and recreation centers. "The work order just showed up," said a construction foreman on the news report, "and we're happy to do whatever the Thunderhead wants." Work orders, supply requisitions, and the like were the closest thing anyone had to communication with the Thunderhead anymore. Those who received them were to be invited. Her boss had been the head of the Fulcrum City office. Loriana was the only junior agent to be working with Director Hilliard. If nothing else, it looked nice on the resume Loriana never sent out. How she had become the director's personal assistant was less about her abilities and more about her personality. Bubbly, some might call it, although others would call it annoying. "You're perpetually cheerful," Director Hilliard had told her when she offered Loriana the position. "There's not enough of that around here." That was true. Nimbus agents were not known for their sparkling personalities. She did her best to liven things up and see many a miserable glass as half full, which, more often than not, irked the other agents. Well, that was their problem. Lorena suspected that Director Hilliard took guilty pleasure in seeing her subordinates wronged on a regular basis by Loriana's positive penchants. Although these many weeks without a thing to do, and no prospects for the future, had popped most of her bubbles, leaving her about as flat as any other Nimbus agent. "I have a job for you," Director Hilliard said. "Actually, more than a job," she corrected. "More like a mission." Lorena was thrilled. The first positive thing she had felt since the authority interface had been shattered. "I have to warn you," Director Hilliard said. "This mission will involve some trouble." And although Loriana was much more skilled in staging put, she knew this might be the only opportunity she'd have in the foreseeable future. "Thank you so much," Loriana said, vigorously shaking her boss's hand long past the point where most others would have stopped. And now, 2 weeks later, she was out in the middle of the ocean on a tuna longliner that wasn't doing any fishing, but still reeked of its last catch. "There weren't many options when it came to ships," Director Hilliard had told everyone. "We had to take what we could get." As it turns out, Loriana wasn't the only one chosen for this mission. Hundreds of Nimbus agents had been brought in. Now, they populated a dozen mismatched ships. A bizarre ragtag flotilla bound for the South Pacific. 8.167,167.733, Hilliard told them in the preliminary briefing. "These numbers were given to us by a reliable source," she said. "We think they represent coordinates." Then she brought up a map and pinpointed a spot somewhere between Hawaii and Australia. The targeted spot showed nothing but empty sea. "But what makes you think they're coordinates?" Loriana asked the director after the briefing. "I mean, if all you had were random numbers, they could mean nothing. How can you be sure?" "Because," the director confided, "as soon as I spoke my suspicion that they might be coordinates, I began to receive advertisements for ship charters in Honolulu." "The Thunderhead?" Hilliard nodded. "While it's against the law for the Thunderhead to communicate with Encyclopedias, it's not against the law to imply." On the 4th day out, still several hundred miles from the coordinates, things began to get weird. It began with the autopilot losing its connection to the Thunderhead. Without that connection, it could still navigate, but couldn't problem solve. It was just a mindless machine. Not only that, but they lost all radio connection to the outside world. This sort of thing simply didn't happen. Technology functioned, always, even after the Thunderhead went silent. And in the void of answers, speculation quickly became incendiary. What if this is all white? What if the Thunderhead is dead? What if we're truly alone in the world now? There were people who were actually glancing at Loriana, as if she might lighten things with a silver lining. We'll turn around, blustered one of the agents. Sakura was his name, a small-minded man who had been a naysayer from the beginning. We'll go back and forget about this nonsense. It was Loriana who made the crucial observation as she looked at the blinking error screen. It says we're 30 nautical miles from the nearest network, boy, she said. But they're supposed to be 20 miles apart, aren't they? A quick check of the buoy grid showed no signals, which meant the Thunderhead had no presence in these waters. Interesting, said Director Hilliard. Good catch, Agent Barchok. Loriana wanted to print from the praise but didn't let herself. Hilliard took in the uncharted waters ahead. Did you know that the human eye has a huge patch of nothing just off the center of its field of vision? Loriana nodded. The blind spot. Our brains tell us there's nothing to see there and fill in the blanks so we don't even notice it. But if the Thunderhead has a blind spot, how would it even know that it exists? Director Hilliard raised her eyebrows. Maybe someone told it. I continue to keep this journal, even though there is no on it. A daily endeavor is difficult to break once it becomes ingrained in who we are. Munira assures me that, come what may, she will find a way to slip this journal into the archive at the Library of Alexandria. That would be a first, a site who continues their dutiful journaling even after death. We have been here at the Hilliard Atoll for 6 weeks now, with no communication from the outside world. While I itch to hear news of Murray and how she fared at the inquest of Endura, I cannot dwell on it. Either all went well, and she's presiding over Mid-America's High Blade, or it did not go her way, and our task becomes an even greater challenge. All the more reason to unlock the secret of the atoll and access the wisdom of the founding sites. Their contingency plan for the Scythedom's failure, whatever it is, could be the only thing that can save it. Munira and I have taken up residence in the bunker we found. We've also constructed a rudimentary canoe that is small enough to obey the island security system. It can go any distance, of course, but we've been using it to paddle out to the nearer islands of the atoll. We've been finding much the same there as we found here. Evidence of earlier habitation, concrete slabs, fragments of foundations, nothing extraordinary. We have, however, learned the original purpose of the place, or at least how it was used toward the end of the Mortal Age. The entire Hilliard Atoll was a military installation, not for the actual waging of war, but as a proving ground for emerging technologies. While some of the other nearby atolls were blasted with tests of nuclear weaponry, this atoll was used for the testing of rockets, as well as for the launching of spy satellites, some of which might even still be in the Thunderhead's observational satellite network. It's obvious now why the founding sites chose this place. It was already protected by layers of secrecy. Thus, with a foundation of shadow already in place, it made it easier to erase it from the world completely. If only we could access everything in the bunker, we might learn how the founding sites repurposed this place. Unfortunately, we can't get beyond the uppermost level. The rest of the installation is behind a door with double gem locks that require 2 sides, one standing on either side of the door, to open. As for the island's defense system, we don't know how to disable it, but being very literally under the radar makes it a moot point. The problem is, now that we are here, whether we find anything or not, we cannot leave. From the Postmortem Journal of Scythe Michael Faraday, May 14th, Year of the Raptor.